Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad that you're choosing to invest an hour of your day learning with us. As you're coming into today's event, we want to invite you to go ahead and locate the chat. We would love to engage with you throughout today's session in the chat. So if you could take a quick moment and please use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees, and then let us know where you're calling in from on this beautiful day. I hope it's beautiful where you are. It is very beautiful where I am. Bonnie, is it beautiful where you are?
It is overcast. It's going to be beautiful in a couple of hours, but I think there is a fire a little bit north of us, so we're getting some smoke.
Yikes. Okay, well, welcome Sharon in Toronto. Welcome Janine in Rockville, Maryland. Elizabeth in New York City. Welcome in Columbia, South Carolina and Southern California. Morgantown, West Virginia. Columbia, Missouri. And Costa Rica. It's a beautiful day there. Madison, Wisconsin, Springfield, Missouri. We would always love to also hear if you're calling in connected to your work in an organization. Quite often before the pandemic, we would have people gather in groups. We're pretty confident that you're not gathering in groups with your team today. However, if you are representing an organization, we would love to give a shout out to you as well. I'm noticing a lot of international callers since I last read this out, and we do have Elaine from San Diego from calledtowork.org. So welcome, and welcome from is it SUNY New York in the Bronx, or is it actually a city, University of New York, Lehman College in the Bronx?
University of New York, yeah.
Yeah, so welcome from there, and welcome in Nigeria. Welcome from Virginia Norfolk State University. Welcome at Haskell and White in Irvine, California. Welcome at Change Fusion in Falls Church, Virginia. So it's so great to see so many of you choosing to invest your time in learning about how to keep your career thriving in these strange times. So before we dive into today's event, we do want to let you know about a few technical considerations. We are broadcasting live on Facebook on the Weaving Influence page. So in the event that you would want to share this event right now with your friends and colleagues, you can do so by going to the Weaving Influence page on Facebook. The second thing to know is that we are recording today's event, and along with all of our other webinars, it will live on our YouTube channel after today's event so that you can share it again with your colleagues or friends. We will be viewing the chat. I will be viewing the chat during today's event in the event that you have questions along the way. So please feel free to type your questions as much as they are relevant to the moment, and as much as I'm able to, I will address those questions in the moment, and we will also save some time at the end if you have additional questions. Also, if you'd like to tweet today, we would love to have you join us, sharing your thoughts live on Twitter. And please use the hashtag #PoliticsOfPromotion if you choose to live tweet today. So before we dive in any further, I want to take a moment to share with you about a little bit more about our presenter today, Bonnie Marcus. If you've already been on a webinar with Bonnie in the past, would you tell us that in the chat quickly? I have been enjoying this series with Bonnie so much, and today is the latest installment. I think this is webinar number, is it 7?
6 or 7.
6 or 7?
Yeah.
So it looks like it's Rosa's first time. She has not joined us before. We'd love to hear from you if this is your first webinar with Bonnie Marcus. And just a few notes about Bonnie. Bonnie is a top-ranked executive coach. She has an extensive career and has been a CEO at a company and had many other executive roles. I don't have her bio in front of me today, but Bonnie is also a best-selling author of The Politics of Promotion, and she has a new book coming out next year. And I'm getting a lot of yeses on this is a first time with Bonnie, which is amazing. For those of you who have returned, we do have new content today, so no worries on that. And I also have a note from Carol saying that she always tries to join when you are on. Lynn says this is her first webinar with you, but that she follows you faithfully on Facebook. So lots of newbies today, and we're so thrilled to have you. So as we dive into today's content, we want to get started with a poll to make sure that we can get your feedback on this important topic. So I would love to know from you, and Bonnie would love to know, what are your greatest challenges staying visible in a remote environment? Is it the many, many Zoom meetings that you have to participate in a daily basis? Is it that it's hard to get visibility and stand out? Are you not really sure how to use this new remote work situation to your advantage? Do you have less face time with your manager and less visibility with senior leadership? So please take a moment to answer the poll. And in the event that for some reason you can't see the poll on today's call, what I would invite you to do is go ahead and put your thoughts and comments into the chat. And a gentle reminder, when you use the chat, please use the drop-down menu quickly to select all panelists and attendees, which will allow everyone who's on the call to see your comments and questions. So Bonnie, what do you think is going to stand out from this poll?
I was thinking about it as you just put up the poll that, we're now, we started this isolation in March.
Mm-hmm.
So March, April, May, we're over 3 months into it. And things change, right? We've adapted, we've had to adapt. And so we're much more used to some of the Zoom meetings and the technology. And if we did this poll, say in April, it might have been different than we're doing it now. So we're probably more used to the technology, but how to use that to our advantage to gain visibility that would be really much easier when we had face-to-face meetings, or we'd grab somebody, in the cafeteria at work, and it was much more casual. So yeah, I'm curious to see what the challenges are today.
Let's take a look. It looks like the top two answers are hard to get visibility and stand out, and less visibility with senior leadership. And we do have a few comments in the chat. Mary says it's hard to get people's attention. Tony says managers don't seem to have time for their teams. Roberta says it's easy to get excluded. So several thoughts there. So 27% of people say it's hard to get visibility and stand out. 27% say less visibility with senior leadership. And, all the other answers are fairly well represented as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that a couple of months ago, just the whole Zoom meeting thing would have been, have a much higher percentage than it does today. And for better or for worse, we're getting used to Zoom meetings, and I know most people are really tired of Zoom, but thank God we have it. I just want to add, for those of you who are on team meetings on Zoom a lot, there are some things that you can do to stand out. One of the things that I've really liked about everybody being on Zoom is when I watch the news, I get to see the pundit, I get to see their houses. So all these people from, reporters from Washington Post or New York Times, whatever, are either sitting in their kitchen or the living room, and you get to see their background. People now can see, this is my office. But I think if you're in a large Zoom meeting where, your whole team is there, one simple way to stand out is to select a visual background that is plain, like a green screen or something, so it's just your head. At times I've put Monterey, California in the back, I put the Golden Gate Bridge, different things that I like, mostly when I'm Zooming with friends. But I think when you are trying to look professional and you're trying to bring more visibility to who you are, your persona, the less background stuff you have, the better. So that's just, a quick little tip on how to stand out in your team meetings using Zoom.
So that can cut down some of the distractions and also just bring attention to your presence in the meeting. Thank you. There are tons of comments here. Doug mentioned Zoom fatigue is definitely a thing. Wade says getting lost in the cloud. Julie says I got hired during COVID, and it's challenging to get people to be open to my ideas as a new employee. So we may be able to circle back to that a little bit later than before. In today's call. So as we start, what are some other things that people can do to prepare for meetings to make sure that they can have the best possible impact?
So overall, I would say that most of my tips today and from my coaching are really how to be strategic, right? And think about things and plan ahead of time so that you can leverage opportunities. And, that's been my coaching advice from day one. And so as it relates to meetings, see if you can get the agenda for the meetings ahead of time. and prepare. So if you know there's certain topics on that meeting, on that agenda, you can formulate, you can do some research, do your homework, you can formulate your ideas and make sure that you have a clear way to articulate those ideas going forward. You can also think about, okay, I've got this idea. Well, how do I sell it to my colleagues? How do I build influence for that idea, even maybe before the meeting or during the meeting? So if you can get, or if you know what the topic's going to be, and you have some ideas that would add value, right, to your department, your colleagues, your organization, think that through ahead of time and be prepared to present that idea, whether or not you ask for time because you have that idea. So if you were just doing it on the fly, it would be much harder to find your voice. So one of my clients is in Europe, and she works for Microsoft. She's a customer relationship manager. And during a meeting, Microsoft said, we really want to increase the engagement of our customers. So we want you to go out and, talk to your major customers or whatever. But what she did was she thought about it and she said, I have a great idea. What I'm going to do is propose to my colleagues that we all video interview our major customers and put together some kind of like video newsletter. So initially she had that great idea. She presented it at the meeting. She built consensus for that with her colleagues ahead of time. What's in it for them? Well, they get more visibility too. She got visibility with senior leadership who thought it was a great idea. So that newsletter is going out to everybody across Microsoft. And so it was the idea that here was the objective. She thought about it, came up with this idea, then put it in motion to build consensus around that idea and then present it. So that's a great example of being strategic and being proactive and getting visibility, not only in the meeting, but afterward. Another way to get visibility is to then take an idea that you've presented or somebody else has presented and send an email out to everyone afterward, either acknowledging their idea was great or adding another article that would give more information about that idea, but that showing that you're engaged and you can leverage that idea in some way, shape, or form going forward.
That's really helpful. So Bonnie, there are a couple of questions here. People love the idea of the prep work. And we have a question both from Steve and Jenna about what's the best way to get recognized if you have an idea to add during the meeting. Maybe you didn't get added to the agenda. So we're in the middle of a meeting, we have an idea. So how do you break into a Zoom conversation in an appropriate way to get your topic or idea heard?
So, I mean, ideally, you would have a conversation with the host of the meetings, that you have this idea. And, it's hard to say whether or not your manager is then open to ideas and, brainstorming. But I would make that suggestion to the manager ahead of time. Can we open this up for new ideas, or I have this great idea that I'd like to present. If not, you still need to raise your hand and say that you have this idea. If you don't get time in the meeting, what you can do is follow up with an email to everybody, including your manager or senior leadership, and that you'd like to discuss it for the next time.
Got it. Well, I wonder, Bonnie, I'm curious about whether at this point we can use the technology to serve us. So, in some meetings, what I've done is send a private message to someone, hey, I have something I'd like to add here, or to use the chat as a place, if you're not able to voice your idea, at least to introduce the idea. And I guess that's dependent upon whether or not that person who's running the meeting or facilitating the meeting is attending to the chat.
Or whether they do that.
Right.
The best thing is to be able to present your idea, or at least say, for the next meeting, I'd like to do a follow-up and try to get some time or some visibility for that idea.
Sure. We have quite a few questions coming in already, Bonnie, that are relevant to what we're talking about now. So I'm going to pause and take a couple before we move on with additional suggestions. So Sharon said that pre-COVID, there was an opportunity to read into the politics of the workplace, the relationships at work, by seeing people interact. And now it's tough to read into situations. And so she's wondering if there's any tips that you might have on how to navigate around this.
That's really tough. I would say, if you are new to an organization, it's especially challenging, right? If you have been there a while, you know how to tap in to get, information, right, from your colleagues, pretty much about what's going on. In your network, you should have some trusted colleagues who have relationships across the organization to get information on, hey, are things changing, or what's coming down the pike. They're people who have that kind of information that can also open up doors for you.
Mhm.
Having a regular meeting with your manager is also the key to doing that.
So asking what's happening to get information from your manager. That's helpful. So follow up to that from Zen. What if you are new to the company and you're working from home, so you don't know that many people? How would you go about networking with others that you might run into at the kitchen if running into them in the kitchen isn't an option anymore?
I would set up some virtual FaceTime or meetings with them. And you do have the advantage of being new. And so what you can say is, I'm new and I'd like to learn more about you and the work you do and what's going on in your department, because I haven't had the chance to meet you in the cafeteria or whatever. And I think people would respond.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So proactively inviting someone to meet with you. One more, Bonnie. Catherine said that usually a meeting host will email for agenda items to be added, but we may not get the finalized agenda prior to the meeting to get a sense of what else is on the agenda ahead of time. So do you have any suggestions on how to work around that?
Well, certainly you would, if you have a new idea or something that you would like to discuss, try to get it on the agenda.
Mhm.
If there's something that was left over from the last meeting, or there are some department or company initiatives that you think that you can propose some new ideas around, try to get that on the agenda. But usually, there are ongoing discussions about things.
Yes.
And if you have a new idea or a new way that you can add value, I would definitely seek to leverage that.
Got it. So far we've been talking about getting visibility by coming prepared to meetings, by thinking about ways that you can add value in the meeting, whether bringing an idea, and then we also spoke about the follow-up. So are there additional ways that we should consider following up to keep more visibility?
Yeah, I would suggest following up, looking for pertinent, as I said, pertinent articles that may be appropriate to some ongoing discussions or some of the challenges you and your colleagues are having in your department. Always copying, your manager and perhaps your HR manager. So there are ways to stay visible that way, and also to position you as a leader, as somebody who is continuing to add value. So that's one way. You can publish articles yourself on certain topics that may be appropriate, like on LinkedIn. Maybe there is a book that you've read recently that you think your colleagues would appreciate some kind of a review or do an article on.
Mhm.
And so keeping your network alive and showing how you can add value is always something that you should think about in your strategic brain. Um, Another way is to do what I call create your own visibility plan. So we probably have a career path plan, or, we know that we are here in a certain position. Maybe we want to move to a different position, a different department. And so hopefully we have a plan in place on how to get from where we are now to where we want to be. And that's
Mhm.
very strategic. So if any of you are out there and you have some ambition and you are interested in moving your career forward, even if it's a lateral move, right? I highly suggest you put a plan in place. But now what I'm talking about and is part of that plan would be how to get visibility. So what you do is you create your visibility plan. And now you have the mindset of, okay, how can I be more visible? What are some things that I can do in this organization and even in this current environment to gain more visibility? So, for instance, are there certain initiatives that the company is putting forward? Like my client with Microsoft, they're trying to get more customer engagement. So, is there a certain initiative or project that you can volunteer for?
Mhm.
That you can, where you can add value? Think about the way you can add value. You would get, obviously, you'd get visibility with key stakeholders and with senior leadership.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I love this idea around a visibility plan because I think, Bonnie, what you're adding when you have a plan is you're adding the strategic part, but also the intention. And I think sometimes, especially during the pandemic, or we have a lot of other demands on our time and energy, we could think, well, I just need to put my head down and I need to survive. But what you're saying is like turn that around and think about, is there a way I can show up with an intention instead of just to get through the day?
So, believe me, it's a lot to get through the day, especially when you've got kids, you've got homeschooling. Of course, now we're in summer session, so worry about that anymore. But um, maybe your partner also is working from home. I know that it can be really trying getting through the day. But I think now at this point, we've developed a bit of a routine so that we are a little better at managing our time. And now it's not just surviving, it's thriving.
Mhm.
So I think the mindset is, okay, I've survived like for 3 months or whatever, and now I have to figure out how to move into the thrive, how to move into and how to gain more visibility, especially if you're still working from home. Another idea I'm going to throw out there is maybe you work with your colleagues in your department to create some kind of a lunch and learn or brown bag lunch thing, where you collaborate and come up with topics that might be of interest and value.
Mhm.
And you work together to schedule these, I don't know, once a month or something. Maybe it's even around a book that you are reading that might be good for professional development. But you can also bring in different speakers or take turns amongst yourself facilitating.
Mhm.
And so this could be something that you share with your manager, certainly, but then maybe it's shared across the organization eventually. And the invites give you a lot more visibility that way.
So it sounds like volunteering to do almost anything is a way to stand out and get some additional
Not
visibility.
almost anything.
Okay, so,
So the key is to be strategic because you just
aha.
want to be busy to be busy. So what is, any time a volunteer opportunity comes um, across, and somebody just said strategic volunteering. Yes.
Mhm.
You don't want to come across as a doer who's just going to say yes to everything. So you have to weigh um, who, who is making the request. Do they have power and influence over my career right now? How much visibility am I going to get? And how much do I have to gain by doing something like that? So your visibility plan isn't just blank visibility. It's visibility with whom and how important it is. One way to get visibility across an organization is, of course, networking. But very often we stay in our comfort zone networking. If we can take the lead and create some kind of cross-generational networking within our department and across the organization, then that expands our visibility a lot. And can we do that virtually? There are different ways that I think that you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can create different watch parties, if there's certain events that are coming up that your colleagues might like, you can take a poll and see what people would be interested in. So any activity like that where you're really collaborating and you're bringing different ideas together, whether it's a lunch and learn or a watch party for something across different generations, I think is really helpful.
Sure. So we have a great question in chat that I want to take before we move on with some additional suggestions about visibility. Trisha is wondering if you think that more remote work fosters or quells office politics.
Well, office politics never goes away. And politics is basically relationships between people. I think if there were cliques before the pandemic, those are probably still intact. I think if your manager has a favorite, maybe that changes with remote work. But there still may be a favorite and there still may be a new favorite, and how you can figure that out is just observing meetings, who gets called on more and gets more attention, and what kind of work are they doing to get that attention, and who are their clients and how are they leveraging their time on a Zoom meeting. So I think it's a really good question. I would say the politics is probably less obvious and it goes undercover. But as soon as everybody's back in the workplace, it'll be more obvious again that it's still there.
Got it. That's helpful, Bonnie. So back to these ideas around creating a visibility plan. I know we have quite a few more that we want to address.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea also to, especially if you're a more seasoned employee, and not just starting out in your career, that you say to your manager, or maybe you even approach your HR rep about mentoring somebody else. If there's a formal mentor program in your organization, can you be a part of it?
Mm-hmm.
If not, is that something that you would work with HR to start? But offering to mentor somebody really leverages your talent and gives you visibility.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And also, I think, just shows your commitment to the organization, even in a difficult time when others may be just trying to get by.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the other part of that is to find your own sponsor. You may have a mentor already, but finding a sponsor and working with a sponsor is, of course, the most powerful relationship you can have in the workplace. And unlike a mentor who gives you advice and is much more of a role model, a sponsor is someone who is at a high level in the organization, and they say at least 2 levels above you. who has the power and influence to create opportunities for you and make things happen. So if your sponsor has some kind of an initiative or something that they're really interested in right now, see if you can help out in some way. That's the type of initiative that you want to volunteer for, so you get visibility with that person. Because, and I want to stress this, you don't just reach out cold and say, Becky, would you be my sponsor? These relationships usually develop organically over time, and that requires that sponsor to have some visibility with you and your work. So if there is, for the women who are on this call, if there's a women's leadership initiative in your organization, that's certainly something that you can get involved in, or you can start, or work with an executive sponsor to start. So I've had clients in the past who didn't have a sponsor. They got involved in an initiative like this and found an executive who had the same values, and asked them if they would sponsor the initiative, and they developed this relationship, and over time he became her sponsor. So that's another great way to get visibility.
That's really powerful. So Melissa does have a question on this topic of sponsorship. She's wondering if you have any successful examples or key components of a sponsor program that will add value and be effective. So that may be a bit more than what we can answer in this call, but if you have a few thoughts.
So of a sponsor program, so I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure.
You want a relationship with a key stakeholder who understands the value you bring to the organization and the potential that you have within the organization. That being said, it should be a two-way win-win relationship. So you should also be thinking about, well, how can I help this person? And is that a good way to lead? Perhaps that's a good way to lead. So I've had clients in the past that have helped their sponsor understand more about what was going on in the field. So it's not appropriate for today, but if he or she had a new idea or initiative that was coming down, how did people feel about it in the meetings, in the rollout meetings? And she would be his eyes and ears in the field, because that's one thing that executives usually lack. They don't have that direct feedback or information. They just rely on their direct reports. So that's a great way. Maybe helping them with some technology is another great way. But the first thing you need is a relationship with a potential sponsor, and I wouldn't limit it to one. So if you're identifying people who could be potential sponsors, develop visibility, develop relationships with all of them, and see where they go. Because, you probably aren't going to get 100% conversion.
Sure. So Melissa was just referencing and clarifying her question. She said some companies have sponsorship programs similar to mentor programs to advance women and diverse employees, because it's hard to do that organically. So I'm guessing in that case, she's referring to you've been formally matched with the mentor, and how can you make that more successful? Or a sponsor, I guess.
Yeah, if you've been formally matched, I would, and I outline this in my book, what to do is how to frame that relationship from the first meeting going forward is you want to make it formal, especially if there's a program. So what are the expectations for both parties? Mm-hmm. And therefore you can kind of, hold each other accountable going forward. The expectation, the sponsor says that they will do X, Y, Z. And you will then live up to their expectations, because usually a sponsor is putting their reputation at risk by sponsoring you. So you have to perform and do the good work and meet their expectations. And then, as I just mentioned, is offer to help. What can you do for that particular sponsor that would be of value to them?
So to make the relationship a win-win.
Strong, yeah.
Got it. So we do have another question to take quickly from Lisette. She wonders what advice you can give to gain strategic visibility if your manager is opposite you in terms of work style. And then she mentions also influenced by generations, so millennials and baby boomers. So maybe you're in a situation, your manager is a different uh, generation, you have a different work style. So how can you work to get visibility with them?
Well, it's important to understand um, what that particular manager wants and needs. What are their objectives and what are they hoping to achieve? And then how can you help them achieve that objective? How can you help them? How can you add value in a certain way? And that requires having, a one-on-one meeting with your manager to set those expectations around the relationship. If there are challenges in communication, then I would definitely address that and say, and say what your challenges are that you are, that you are having. If you're the manager, what's your communication challenge with your direct report? If you're the direct report, what are some of your challenges going forward? And what is the best way for me to communicate with you going forward? Because we make assumptions that either our manager never wants to hear from us, or they're too busy, or they don't understand the technology maybe, so they're not available. But asking that question can really clarify and bridge those types of gaps. So I don't want to make assumptions about what all the gaps may be, but I would say that having a meeting and asking those types of questions will hopefully clarify going forward. And asking questions and being specific.
Hmm.
So sometimes we just ask general questions and then we don't get the information that we need. And somebody said, oh, our communication's okay. And then you're like, oh, they said it's okay, so I'll just drop it. Because we're like, I'm okay if they're okay, but it's really not okay with you because you still have challenges. So the more specific, or the better examples you can give. Like, yeah, I know for the most part they've been pretty good, but last week I noticed in my meeting with you, or in the general meeting, you said this, and when I responded, this happened, and help me understand how to better communicate. Try to be specific if you want to get good feedback. Sometimes that requires not just taking the first answer and walking away.
Sure. So it sounds like what we need is to be proactive and to dig deeper, to ask specific questions if you're not getting the feedback that you want the first time you ask a question.
Yeah, so I'm not sure who asked that, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that was Lizette. So feel free to follow up if there's some additional help we can give to you today. Certainly so.
The other thing that I have talked about, maybe in every webinar we've had, I don't know, but certainly the last one
Hmm.
was doing a weekly status report for your manager. In this remote environment, it is much more important than ever before. Because, as some of you have commented, well, my manager is super busy, and they don't necessarily have the time, that I could have in a face-to-face meeting. So the weekly status report is a template which I'd be happy to send out. I did after the first webinar, that you can use, that you would send weekly to your manager, whether or not you're having a face-to-face or not. that lists the current things that you're working on, what you achieved, what your progress has been in the last week on those projects, and then any questions or challenges you may have going forward. I suggest you do this for a number of reasons. First of all, it can be the agenda for your meeting. So very often managers aren't that great about doing the catch-up meetings and they don't find them valuable. Here, it's the agenda. You're going through the different projects you're working on, what you've achieved, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's really good is you now have written documentation. Your manager has written documentation of everything you've accomplished over that time period. So when they come to, when they have to do your performance review, really all they have to do is look over at your status reports. And if you don't normally meet weekly, you can do them every other week. I suggest doing them weekly and send them even if you don't have the meeting. And also, you have a record, because I remember doing, self-evaluations for my performance review at the end of the year, and you lose track of everything you've done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of which was pretty important, like, yeah, maybe you helped close a big deal, but what are all the steps you took to make that happen? And
Mm-hmm.
we lose sight of all that. But if you're putting it down in a weekly report, you get to go back and you've got documentation and your manager has documentation. And if you have a new manager, you can send reports, the back reports to your new manager about, well, let me bring you up to date. This is what's happened with that project so far.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And we have lots of people in the chat saying that they'd like to get the template. So we will put that in our follow-up email. And we also have a question from Tina, and she's wondering, what do you do if your manager regularly cancels your one-on-one meetings?
Yeah, that sucks. Well, I would still send the weekly report. That's more important than anything. Send it out and say, you know, do you have any comments or questions? Or I'd appreciate your comments and questions. But certainly, if you have certain challenges with a project, stop the report and then make that comment and make that referral to that you would like their input on a specific aspect of the report or the work that you're doing. Try to get
Sure.
in writing if you can't get it face to face. But the weekly report is then even more important.
Well, and especially this question about visibility and many people feeling lost working remotely and feeling like they don't have that visibility. I wonder if it might even be appropriate, when a manager cancels a meeting to ask about, can we reschedule this week, or to stress how important it is to you to be able to meet the person, you know, even to just own, hey, I feel, I miss the chance to talk with you. When can we meet? I have some progress to share.
Well, what I would do, Becky, first of all, is I would try to hold a standing meeting with my manager. Ask for it, right? So it's like, the second Friday of every month or whatever. So that there's something there and you're not chasing them to have a meeting. You want it on your calendar, you want it on their calendar, and you don't leave it to chance. So then if they cancel, you can always bring it up in the next meeting, or if you need their input before, you can send an email and ask for a separate meeting, but definitely still send the report.
Got
Definitely.
it. So here's a happy story from Rosa, sharing about something that her daughter's organization did to keep their team engaged. So if you're a leader, you might want to listen up right now. So her daughter works for a US company but is based in Costa Rica, and the company sent a package to each employee with a box of food and an alcohol gel, a hand sanitizer, and a message that says, we'll see you soon. And she said it was like fuel to help those workers feel more connected when they're working remotely. She actually named the company. I don't know if I'm allowed to share it or not. But if you're a leader, that's a super idea too. And yeah.
But that just reflects some of the things that we were talking about earlier, that to get visibility and engagement with your colleagues and your manager is doing things, not sending gift boxes, but hey, I know that there's an event this week on this particular topic. Let's do a watch party. Let's do something. Let's, you know, have a happy hour. I don't, when this pandemic started, I had more happy hours than possibly manage. That has calmed down a little bit, but those ways are, think of topics, think of good ideas. And I know with some of my colleagues, we pick a movie and we'd watch the movie during the week, and then we'd get together and discuss the movie. But you can also do that with a book or a certain lecture series.
Hmm. Yeah, those are great ideas. Karen mentioned that she heard about a company picnic was canceled, and then all the picnic food was sent to people so they could have a virtual picnic.
Okay. I think I would have sent it to the food bank, but
Yeah, that would work too.
but that brings up another idea, which may or may not work. But a lot of us are starting to get out there a lot more. What can you do with your colleagues? Maybe you want to organize some kind of a charitable event.
Mhm.
Maybe you do want to go to the local food bank. Maybe you do want to do some tutoring. I mean, there are great opportunities within your community, and you can work with your colleagues and get visibility for that across the organization. And maybe you want to organize something not just in your department. Maybe it starts with your department, but then it's a company-wide event. So again, be strategic, think visibility, and think about how you can add value.
So Trisha's asking for some clarification on the idea of a watch party, and I'll try to take a stab at this. So on Facebook, there is a feature that you could start what's called a watch party. So if you're on Facebook, you could, for example, with today's webinar, go to share it and create a watch party where you and your colleagues, wherever you're located, would watch a webinar like this one together on Facebook Live. Bonnie, do you have any other thoughts to add on that?
That's really what I was thinking of, because that's the only technology I'm aware of that does it. And I think there's probably more coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of innovation around that, but that's basically what I was thinking of, that technology, Facebook Live.
Certainly. Well, and Zoom does have technology that allows you to optimize video. So you could do a discussion group. If there's a video that everyone wants to watch together, you use Zoom, you optimize the video, you play the video, and then you can have time to discuss it after.
Yeah. But I think, I just want to mention again the idea that my client had of using video with clients and creating some kind of a newsletter, a video newsletter. Because, I mean, what great visibility and credibility she got by doing that.
Hmm.
And I was so proud of her for doing that, because it was extra work. And so, first of all, she had to sell it to her colleagues who were like, huh? I just want to talk to, have a phone conversation. But then when she got their buy-in as part of it, it is now, a big deal in the Microsoft community, especially in Europe. I don't know whether it went global. But think about ideas like that. What kind of work are you doing now? And how can you either make connections um, with either clients or some of your colleagues about, maybe there's a new best practice, maybe you're in project management and there's something that you can put together and discuss with your colleagues on video that you can then distribute throughout the organization. So it's one thing to do great work, and then it's another to just kind of bury it. So think about ways that you can leverage some of the work that you're doing now, that where other people could really benefit from some of the lessons that you've learned, and use the current format, the video, to be able to put something together, you know, some kind of lesson, whether it's a brown bag lunch or just a video that's sent out. Do you have opportunities to do some kind of video newsletter with your colleagues? So once you have that mindset of, I'm going to create visibility, I need to think strategically about how to do it, I know that you'll all be really creative and think of something to help gain that visibility.
Well, and we'd actually like to give you the chance to practice that in real time. And what we'd like to invite everyone to do now, and we will be sharing these out as you start to type them in, we'd love to know, what is one action that you can take in the week ahead or the month ahead to highlight your visibility within your organization? And we'd invite you to put that in the chat. We'd remind you to use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees. So the first step is, think of a way that you can be more visible in your organization and share that first action with us, and then we'll be sharing them out with all of you as you type those in. And one of the things that occurs to me, Bonnie, I lead a team of 12, and, I think if people have ideas and they show that desire to have creativity, even if the idea isn't something I'm prepared to implement, their bringing the idea to me creates additional visibility, whether I follow through on the idea or not. Wow, we have a lot of ideas here. So it looks like some people are going to start doing weekly status reports.
Yay!
There are several of those. Tony says he's going to create a plan. Brian says he's going to set up those weekly or bi-weekly meetings with managers to ensure continued community and communication and connection. So Brenda said she's been sending weekly emails with information of where people can get free food and masks for themselves and their families. Sharon says she's going to ask to be a part of senior leaders meeting and present something of value. More people committing to doing the weekly status reports. Karen says she'd like to organize a food drive for local charitable organizations and have a drive-through in the office parking lot to drop off. Share articles related to specific interests. Consider more volunteer opportunities that align with goals. To have discussions within the organization on what partners need and find ways to solve the needs. These are some really powerful ones. Roberta says, when in a meeting and have a thought, not hold back, and if she has an agenda item, she'll add it to the meeting. Status reports again, and we'll speak up appropriately in weekly all staff hangouts. Create a plan, keep doing weekly updates. Jenna says she loves the status report idea and will implement that. And her manager is terrible at facilitating team meetings, and so she'll volunteer to fulfill that role. Carrie says sharing articles on topics brought up at Zoom meetings. Yes, Austin, we will share the template for the weekly status report. And Michael says he's going to ask his manager what he might want him to do to help, and then make the status report speak to what his manager wants. Tony is going to create her visibility strategic plan, share articles, add items to weekly meeting agendas, and create weekly reports. So wow, there's a lot of key actions that people have.
One thing you said, one person said their weekly manager was really good at wasn't good at all about pulling team. So that's a great way to get visibility, is to ask your colleagues what needs to be on the agenda, what ideas they have, and pull that meeting together, whether or not your manager facilitates it or you, or maybe you rotate facilitation and you all take turns with the team meeting and you all get the chance, to step up and be the leader. Maybe you also schedule some brainstorming meetings before meetings. But for those of you who have a manager who isn't necessarily very good at that, that's a great time to step up and get visibility and credibility. Opportunity.
So Jenna says rotation is a great idea, bringing visibility to others as well. Rosa says she's taking notes of all the great ideas. Brenda says she's working on teaching the use of Microsoft Teams in her meetings. Um, so Sharon has a quick question about co-working sessions and wondering what those are. Do you have any thoughts on that, Bonnie?
What they are?
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, currently what they are is it's a group of people working on a particular topic together, but they're not sitting around a they're at home on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much everybody is doing that. Zoom gives you the opportunity to do real-time exchange of ideas. I mean, Becky, you and I had a co-working meeting to plan this meeting, uh,
Yes, we did.
and work together to come out, with an outline. So if you are, typically you're working with a number of different people, and that could be across different departments. So it could be an opportunity for you to pull, instead of saying, okay, I have an idea, I'm going to send it to Becky, then Becky is going to send it to another person or whatever. This one's in IT, this one's in marketing, this one's here. Pull together a cross department meeting so that it would be more efficient, and everybody can share their ideas. I think that's what that question was.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, so we are coming close to the end of the hour, and we're so grateful for each of you sharing your next steps and actions. One of the things that I've learned is that having a coach can really help me in making sure that I have support to follow through on the actions I intend. So if any of you who are on the call are curious about coaching, we do have a special offer for you today. If you email Bonnie, and we're putting her email address in the chat, if you email her to explore coaching programs, she does have a special discount for anyone who watches this webinar or was on the webinar, and it applies to all her coaching programs except the Express coaching. So if you would contact Bonnie, she's happy to set up a time to talk to you about coaching, to talk to you about how she can support you in implementing these actions to stay visible in your career, and she would love to hear from you. A couple of other ways that you can get to know Bonnie's work: you can subscribe to her podcast. Today is Podcast Tuesday. There's a brand new episode that just launched, and that podcast is called Badass Women at Any Age. We'd love to have you subscribe and listen. You can also buy Bonnie's book, The Politics of Promotion, on Amazon, and we do have that link for you in the chat. So we want to thank you so much for investing this hour. And Bonnie, how about if I let you finish out the hour by giving us some words of encouragement as it relates to staying visible in the workplace during these remote times?
Yeah, I think my best words of advice are what I started off with, is that very often, and this is so true of my whole coaching theory and practice, is if we leave things to chance, then chances are things aren't going to happen that will help support your career. So it's really important to think strategically, put plans in place. In this case, what we talked about today is, let me think about how I can be more visible. And just that mindset, just that thought, that intention will help you to come up with some ideas on how to be more visible. So think strategic and think about ways where you can take control of your career and move it in whatever direction you want.